Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to take a look at the unique units for the brand new Roman civilization in Age of Empires 2. Now, exploring two fairly complex units with brand new mechanics is a lot to cover, but by design, the two are really meant to be combined explicitly in a way we've never actually seen in the game before. In fact, it's hard to even talk about one without discussing both, as the presence of Centurions has a dramatic effect on the strength of your Legionaries, as we'll see. We'll touch on Legionaries a bit later in the video, and for now, let's start off by looking at the Centurion, which is the Roman castle unique unit. Right away, you might be tempted to link Romans and Byzantines, and assume this is similar to a cataphract, but I think that would be a mistake, as Centurions lack the cataphract's bonus against infantry, resistance to spears and camels, and trample damage, though admittedly they're both expensive unique units requiring an expensive Imperial Age tech, so in that way at least they are similar. Instead, probably the most natural comparison to make in Castle Age is to the Knight, and here we can see the Centurion is a strict upgrade with more HP, attack, and pierce armor. Not captured here is Centurions have a bit slower attack rate than the Knight, but it's not enough to really change the story. In fact, seeing as they're better than the Knight in all major categories, I think arguably the best Castle Age comparison is to the Cavalier, where again it seems they might actually be a little better, especially against crossbows thanks to +1 pierce armor. Right off the bat, they seem to be pretty great, but there is a catch. Their cost per unit is significant, making them not just more expensive than knights, but more expensive than even cataphracts or Mamelukes. Of course, the other drawback as a unique unit is requiring a castle, locking them behind a 650 stone building, combined with a relatively slow training time of 24 seconds. While that is technically faster than a knight and might not sound terrible, it's actually quite slow compared to other cavalry unique units, with for example the Cataphract and Latus taking 20 seconds to train, the Conic at 19, Magyar Hussar 16, Custilier and Boyars at 15, and Tarkans at 14 seconds, to give a few other examples. While this can be sped up with unique tech, presumably it's also a historical nod to the fact that Centurions were infantry commanders, and not intended to be your core unit. To give a general sense of their effectiveness in Castle Age, one-on-one against a fully upgraded knight, they end up with about a third of their HP left over. Even adjusting for the knight's cheaper cost, balancing 10 Centurions against 12 knights, the Centurions still win pretty handily. Maybe even more impressive is against crossbows, they stand out even more, having close to double the knight's resilience to arrows, assuming you have all upgrades, which I'd say more than justifies the Centurion's higher cost. Notice that even without bringing Legionaries into the conversation, the Centurion in Castle Age already seems worth the price, assuming you have the castles to create them. But what about the Imperial Age? Considering they were very similar to a Cavalier in Castle Age, it might not be surprising then that the elite Centurion looks remarkably similar to a Paladin, with 1 more melee armor and attack, but 5 less HP. The downside here again is cost, not just paying more per unit, but also their upgrades are quite expensive. First, you have an elite upgrade at 1100 food and 900 gold, which isn't that out of line with Paladins, but they also add an important unique tech called Comitatenses, speeding up their training time from 24 to 16 seconds and adding an extra charge attack, doing +5 damage every 20 seconds. Usually, front-loaded damage from charge attacks can quickly snowball and shouldn't be ignored, though this is nowhere near the level of the Custilier, for example, which has a charge attack that's 5 times the size. Notably, Comitatenses also applies to your Knightline and Legionaries, so it's maybe not fair to attribute its cost here entirely to the Centurion, but it's still part of a growing pattern that Romans are just expensive to play in Imperial Age. The main point here though is they're a clear step ahead of Roman Cavaliers, and their cost reflects that, but are they worth that high cost? Well, let's look at a few examples. First off, with balanced resources against generic Cavaliers, they win pretty handily, with about a third of their HP left in this example. Even against Roman Cavaliers, with their charge attack, there's no question the elite Centurion more than offsets its higher cost through its stats. In fact, as we saw already, they're quite similar to fully upgraded Paladins, and not only do elite Centurions win that fight one-on-one, but even accounting for cost and balancing resources, the fight can easily go either way. Paladins also make for a nearly perfect comparison against ranged units as well, taking almost an identical number of arrows, and many more than the Cavalier. So far though, we've been looking at the Centurion purely as a knight alternative, and for the most part, it seems to hold up quite well and justify its higher cost over time. That's not its only role though, as the Centurion is actually unique for having an aura effect, increasing nearby militia line units' movement speed by 10% and increasing their attack rate by 25%. Both of those numbers also improve with the Elite Centurion upgrade to 15% and 33%, giving your militia line the combination of the Celts and Japanese infantry bonuses. This works on your militia line units within a 10-tile area, increasing to 12 tiles for Elite, which is actually pretty far when you look at it. The idea is your infantry units fight better with their commanders nearby, and makes a few Centurions worth including even without considering their impressive stats. Let's move on now though and take a look at the Legionary, both with and without a Centurion nearby, which, as you can probably imagine, is going to make a pretty big difference. To start, this is an Imperial Age only unit for the Romans, as a unique upgrade to the Swordsman, replacing both the two-handed Swordsman and Champion. Compared to just the two-handed Swordsman, the upgrade is nearly triple the total cost, but when you throw in the cost of Champion upgrade as well, it's actually a bit of a deal, and also faster to research than the combined total of both techs. Similar to the Centurion, there's a bit of an issue with the cost per unit, as Romans are lacking supplies, putting more pressure on their food eco than most infantry civs in the late game would deal with. So again, acknowledging they're a bit more expensive, the question then is whether or not the cost is ultimately worth it. At first glance, I have to say it's debatable. They have slightly more HP than a Champion, but one less attack, though 2 more melee armor, and the same pierce armor as a two-handed Swordsman or Champion with Gambazans. They're a bit tougher, but also don't seem to hit as hard. Like the Champion, they also have +8 against Eagle Warriors and +4 against buildings. But one hidden advantage in the Legionary's back pocket is an extra +4 against infantry, meaning they actually do +12 against Eagles when you combine their bonuses. In fact, maybe instead of seeing them as a Champion, it's better to see Legionaries as a mix of the Champion and Elite Jaguar Warrior, which also seems to match up better in terms of HP and armor, and similarly has an extra advantage against infantry. Legionaries aren't quite as extreme in that regard, but they're also cheaper than Jaguar Warriors and created at the barracks like the Champion, so they take some of the best attributes from both. On top of this, again, once you research the admittedly expensive Comita Tensei's tech at the castle, Legionaries gain a +5 charge attack and train 50% faster, giving them almost a bit of a goth-like quality at the barracks. One thing actually helping out your upgrade costs as well is keep in mind Romans have only 2 infantry armor upgrades, but get double the effect from each, giving you something better than the final armor upgrade without having to pay for it. To put all of this into perspective and give a sense of their strength, without Comita Tensei's or a nearby Centurion, putting them really in their worst light, one-on-one against a generic Champion, the Legionary wins, with about a quarter of its strength left over. In fact, adding in Comita Tensei's, we get the same result, and the majority of the time, it probably won't change how many attacks you need against an individual target. That said, I will be giving it to them in these next tests, as I want to see Legionaries at their best. The next question though is how much can we expect any of this to reasonably improve if we add a Centurion nearby? To start adding in a non-elite Centurion to shout strategies and encouraging words, we immediately see the Legionary goes from 27% to 41% of its HP left against a Champion, with, remember, its attack rate being boosted here by a quarter and also having 10% faster movement. Upgrading the Centurion to Elite gives an even greater effect on the Legionary's attack rate, letting them end in this case with over half of their HP left. Even if you correct for Romans missing supplies, Legionaries without a Centurion are still strong enough to beat what are otherwise some of the tougher militia lines cost effectively, with Slavs and Bulgarians here as a couple of examples. Clearly, even without a Centurion and outnumbered, the Legionaries' anti-infantry bonus lets them perform fairly well, at least against infantry. That said, if you're up against a really top-tier infantry civilization like Japanese or Goths and we balance resources, baseline Legionaries aren't quite strong enough to come out ahead against those champions. We do have to assume here your opponent has turned their cheaper units into a numbers advantage, but shows that without a Centurion, they're not quite on the same level as a few very specialized infantry civilizations. That flips though if we add an elite Centurion nearby, where Legionaries win against both civilizations, though maybe that shouldn't be surprising, as again they're gaining the Japanese faster attacking bonus for themselves. Either way, properly upgraded and supported, it's pretty clear that Legionaries can handle anyone's champions. Maybe most impressively though, with balanced resources, Legionaries backed up by elite Centurions trade about evenly with elite Jaguar Warriors, carrying their own +10 anti-infantry bonus. Maybe more than any other test so far, this shows that Legionaries are looking pretty great as an anti-infantry choice, easily up there with the best. And in case you're wondering, they don't even take anti-samurai bonus damage, though Centurions do. In fact, maybe the one exception to all of this is the Teutonic Knight, who can win with equal resources even with a Roman Centurion nearby. Though I have to admit it's pretty close, and I would go as far as to say it's still an impressive showing by the Legionaries that they're able to make the fight this competitive. Just as a final illustration of how much better they are against infantry than the regular militia line, here outnumbered 10-6 by halberdiers, generic champions end with 44% of their HP left, which is a reasonably good engagement. But in contrast, legionaries without a centurion end with 70%. Remember, the scorpion is also a common pairing here, given the Romans' lack of bracer and buffs to their scorpion line, which altogether makes infantry a unit type that Romans really shouldn't have a problem with, at least in the very late game, with trade especially. I should also note, in case you're wondering, the Centurion has to be your own to get the effect, and there's no benefit to an ally's militia line, or you can imagine how crazy your allied Japanese champions might get. Even a Roman ally can't get the benefit of another Roman player's Centurion, so every Roman player will have to make their own if they want the aura effect. That said, if you manage to convert an enemy Centurion, you do get the benefit for your swordsman line, meaning for Japanese you could have up to 78% faster attacking champions. But now let's see how legionaries fare against cavalry. While they can beat cavalier with similar total resources and when given a numbers advantage, they're not population efficient. So 10 vs 10 for example, the cavalier wins pretty comfortably. That's even true if we add a centurion nearby, though in that case, obviously the legionaries will perform a bit better. The point is just that while legionaries hold up well to even things like Teutonic Knights, that's because of an anti-infantry bonus, and can't be generalized to all melee units. That said, with an elite centurion and balanced resources to reflect their lower cost, they can beat paladins just barely, which really isn't a bad result, even if it is discounting the importance of the paladin's population efficiency and mobility. Overall, I wouldn't say they counter cavalry, but properly upgraded and supported, the legionary can put up a decent fight. But finally, how do they hold up against ranged units? Well, remember that even if Romans lack gambesons, their legionaries have the same pierce armor as champions with that tech, meaning they take virtually the same number of arrows. This is definitely still a weakness, despite their large-looking shield and famous resilience to archers. So instead, I would look to your other options, like scorpions, skirmishers, or even centurions to deal with archers rather than legionaries, who are infantry and can't be good at everything after all. So that's a look at the Romans' unique units, and personally, I think both work well in the broader context of legionaries being the anti-infantry complement to the centurion, whether that be enemy spear units, eagles, or infantry unique units. For its part, the centurion adds in a way to match enemy heavy cavalry head-on or deal with enemy siege, and your discounted faster firing scorpions add in an extra response to archers and infantry. Now, while the unique units were the focus here, I should point out that these are both largely for the late game, and you won't see Centurions and Legionaries every time, but hopefully this gives you a better sense of what to expect from both of these quite strong unique units when the situation calls for them. That'll do it for this one though. Big thanks to Seb, Jockster, Justin, Samantha, Woodruff, Kyle, James, Steven, Admiral Zarkon, and everyone else on Patreon for their continued support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.